welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed, and we are on a quest to discover philosophy, understand what it is, and learn how to do it in the bestest possible way, as well as learning why we're so interested in philosophy, why it's the most important thing we can do in this life, and apparently also in the next. On that note, we are in the Phaedo, and we are discovering from Socrates himself what exactly is this doctrine of philosophy. And he has said it's the art and practice of death and dying, which is an interesting and bold statement. And so far in the text, he's outlined that what philosophers truly seek is something called the truth. And we associate that to the realm of being. And the second thing that we're after is something called phronesis, something that we are still very much puzzled about, but is tied to not only this realm of being, but some sort of mystical initiation and the virtues that we bring with us into our study of philosophy, that we put into our souls, which are the virtues that start off to be like the body. But there is another virtue called phronesis, the fifth virtue, the four virtues we put that are like the body that we put into ourselves through practice and habit: temperance or sound-mindedness, courage, wisdom, and of course justice. But there is a fifth virtue that we trade these ones in for, called phronesis, that is more divine. So philosophy being the art and practice of death and dying in the pursuit of truth and the virtue of phronesis. That's where we are, and we have some balloons to celebrate that. After Socrates outlined his doctrine, the boys he's talking to, Simmias and Cebes, wanted to know, that you would have to have an immortal soul for that to happen. And Socrates outlined three arguments for the immortality of the soul. His friend Cebes outlined a fourth, the doctrine of learning, that we learn through a kind of remembering. We know everything in some higher, more primary part of the soul that existed before our birth. Socrates laid out for us that, by the way, all of these beings that we're interested in, beauty itself, justice itself, goodness itself, holiness itself, equal itself, greater itself, lesser itself, they have a hyparxis. There's a single head from which they're all attached, which is a metaphor he outlined at the beginning of the text. That pleasure and pain in the physical world is kind of back and forth in the world of becoming, but they are somehow tied together from a head that sticks above the water. Well, he didn't say sticks above the water, but they are tied together from some single head in some mysterious way. Well, playing on that metaphor, all of the ideas that we're interested are tied together in something called self-ousia, which is the realm of being and the object of knowledge that we want to apprehend, called truth. In the text, we read that this was something called noesis, and the preparation for that is our dianoia. Noesis we loosely translate as knowledge, so long as we keep in mind that's the kind of knowledge we mean. But if we can use the Greek word, that's better, because the Greek word has that special meaning, higher meaning. We would even use the word anagogic meaning, of a higher level of the logos. Upward moving, that's what the word means. So an upward version, upward metaphor for knowledge, apprehending the realm of being, which is truth. That was a long sentence. And we get there through something called dianoia, which is a practice that we can better do when we separate ourselves as much as possible from our physical senses. We went over a lot of reasons why that's the case, why it's easier to do philosophy, to do dianoia, to prepare ourselves for nous, when we are most separated from the body, which he's saying is most akin to being dead, by the way. And there's a kind of yoga he outlined of collecting ourselves together from all parts of the body to separate from the body so we can do this dianoia thing better, easier, without our fears and illusions and desires and the need for sustenance and all of these things that can distract us from a single-minded pursuit of philosophy, our hunt for the realm of being, truth, and some sort of integration of this truth that we call phronesis. Still a mystery what phronesis is. How do we do dianoia? Well, we're seeing that there's some use of the logos. We're on the quest to discover the self-logos. We're following the self-logos, and it follows a structure itself called the dialectic. So we're learning the dialectic, and there are a lot of clues sprinkled in throughout the text about the dialectic. Now, all of these things that I just mentioned, do not believe them. Don't believe them. Some things you'll recognize yourself, then nod along so long as you've already recognized them yourself. Philosophy is an activity. It's a quest. It's your quest. Develop your own understanding. Develop your own dialectics. Solve the puzzles yourself. I'm just like casting a wide net in a kind of summary. But of course, it won't mean anything if you haven't seen it yourself, which is the reason why philosophy is better than anything else in the realm of belief and opinions. It's not about belief. It's about developing your own understanding, which is greater than belief and opinions. And of course, we're seeing that's the road to noesis, knowledge of the truth. So, of course, the soul, we listened to those arguments. Seebees gave the final one, the idea that if all learning is remembering, then we must have existed somewhere where we first encountered the things that we're remembering. Therefore, we existed before we were born. Simmias wasn't familiar with this logos, with this argument. He wanted it laid out. Socrates laid it out for him, and we listened ourselves. We followed along ourselves. We hopefully, as though he was talking to us, ideally, so that we benefited ourselves. But not only that, we looked at how he was doing it. So we were not only learning about learning and about the soul's immortality, but we were learning about how to present arguments, how to think. And finally, we were learning about what should change our minds for us to have integrity, for us to learn, for us not to get caught in the traps of ignorance or closed-mindedness that we see so many other people get trapped in, that causes our vices, causes our acts of injustice towards ourselves and others, and prevents us from doing what we need to do here. As Socrates says, if you don't accomplish your work here, you will enter the next life in the mud. Don't want to do that. So we had that third question, not only what is learning in the soul, not only how to present and think, present your arguments and think, but what should change our mind so we don't get stuck in the mud, so we don't get stuck in ignorance or vice or injustice. What should change our mind? At the end of his argument about learning and the soul, what did Simmias, who didn't think that way previously, what did he say about that argument? What did he say about the logos and the dialectic as to whether or not it changed his mind? We still have that as an open question, but he gave us two big terms that maybe relate to the realm of being that we're after, balloons. He also used the word sufficiently, and he used the word demonstrate, which is one of the categories of the dialectic. What were the two things? He said it was necessary. There was a necessity in the logos and a beauty in the logos. Is necessity and beauty, are they two ideas? Aspects of that self-usia in being? Maybe. So it's interesting that the very thing that we're learning, we're actually using as we go. Because to learn, whether we know it or not, we're applying standards from that realm. The argument has to have a logical necessity, or maybe that's tied to justice. Because we know that justice itself has an existence in being. And there's a beauty in the arguments, and self-beauty is, of course, one of the things that we seek in philosophy. So as we learn about those ideas, on our path to reach those ideas, we're using them. Which is fascinating because that highlights something special about philosophy. We're learning the game rules of the game we're already in. All human beings are in this game. Philosophers are those who wake up and go, hang on a second, let's do it rationally. Let's learn the rules so we can do it better. So we can stop making mistakes, find the path that we're walking and walk it properly. We're all in this game. We all seek beauty. We all cry out at injustice when the referee makes the bad call. We're just applying it to the most significant things. What's that? Changing our minds. Changing our minds to seek the truth. Socrates pointed out that this is a method of purification and perfection. Purifying ourselves from what is false and perfecting ourselves in what is true. So, Simmias was sufficiently convinced. He changed his mind. And then Cebes jumped in and going, hang on a second. Guys. So, okay, philosophy is this art and practice of death and dying. It's our purpose while we're here. It's a purification and perfection, all that. And for that to exist, the soul has to have an immortality. We have to be able to separate from our body. And you've pointed out that the soul had to have existed before we were born for us to know the things that we're remembering in this life. But what about after we die? You haven't really covered that. And a lot of people fear death. So can you help slay this fear of death? And we use the idea of the boogeyman. All children, talk to me like you're talking to a child, and slay this childlike fear of death, which is interesting because this hints at the idea that we get our mythology when we're little. How many people understand death? Very few. The true philosophers do. Many are the ones who carry a staff, but few are the true mystics. Those are the ones who practice philosophy correctly. That's what Socrates pointed out, as we read earlier. But how many people fear death? Where do we get this fear of death from? Maybe we get it from childhood. And CB says, talk to me as though you're slaying a childhood fear of the boogeyman. Because I fear that when our body dies, our soul scatters to the wind. Socrates pointed out, actually, in our arguments earlier, that there must be a coming to be alive and a being dead, just as there is a being alive and coming to be dead. There is a circular process. It's a secular process that we go through until we complete what we're here to do. These actually prove that we exist after we're dead as well. That's not enough for CBs. He wants more. So, we're in that argument. The fear of the souls dissolving and scattering to the wind. And he said, by the way, if you can find... earlier we talked about the how philosophers function in the everyday world. We repeat the doctrine of philosophy over and over. And we believe it. And we try and verify it. We have to repeat it. Equally too, he's saying, hey, this argument that slays our fear about death, we need to sing that song every day. Sing it to yourself. And if you can find a singer who can sing you songs that can end your fear of death, look for them. And that's the only thing you should spend your money on, really. There is nothing on which you should more necessarily spend your money than on somebody who can sing songs, which we can recognize as the two aspects of the Phaedo. We're explaining philosophy, but we're also mythologizing it. So singing a song that can work that way would be a kind of mythology in song. But for it to slay the boogeyman of death, it would also have to have the dialectic behind it. And we've been going through that a lot as we go. Not only learning how to do the dialectic, but the necessity for and the fun of mythologizing it, using it in your storytelling, using it in your fan fiction, using it in the songs you make if you're a musician, using it in the art you make if you're an artist of any kind, or just having fun with it in whatever way you want. Mythologizing that which you explain. That's what Socrates says he wanted to do before the sun sets: explain and mythologize. So, and by the way, if you are looking for such a singer, if you are the sort of person who has gotten this far into this series, you are probably going to be that kind of a singer. Socrates says, it's not, if you're going to search for such a singer, search among yourselves also, because it is likely that you will not easily discover someone more able to do this than yourself. So, become that kind of a singer. Where he started, so this argument as to why the soul doesn't scatter, he starts with composite. The sort of things that can break down and scatter apart must be composite things. Something made up of all these parts so that upon death, whatever was holding them together loses its grip so they can scatter, dissolve, fly off to the wind. Composite or incomposite. Incomposite means not made up of many different parts. So that the kind of nature that is composite is the kind that will naturally undergo dispersion and is divided. Whereas something that is incomposite and exists properly and simply will not undergo that. And then he set out these two kinds of beings. The composite and incomposite, which you can relate to the body and the realm of the beings. He pointed out these things that we're interested in, we ask questions about, we apply the logos to through the dialectic. The self-ousia things, like self-equal, self-beautiful, all the self-being that exists. They are uniform and they don't change. It would be funny if beauty itself suddenly became less beautiful, or equality itself no longer was equal to itself. Everything would fall apart. So, whereas in the physical world, yeah, things can become equal and then unequal. Things can become beautiful and less beautiful. So, his question is, what kind is the soul more like? Which of those two kinds of beings? The incomposite single thing like self-ousia and the beings, or the composite composed of many things like the body? Which is the soul more like? Because one can scatter, one can't. And then he brought in the idea of vision. What can you see with your physical senses? Can you see beauty itself or justice itself through your eyes, or equality itself through your eyes? Any of the self-ousia beings? No. Of course, it's self-ousia, which means we have to see it through our ousia function, that cognitive function of the mind that we seek to awaken through philosophy. The eye of the soul. Can you see, if you can't see the beings, but you can see the body, which is the soul? Can you see the soul? That's where he is at the argument. So let's jump into the text, pick it up from there, and see where he goes. Let's recap from the beginning of this argument, and let's see where he goes from there. Let's jump in. Here's the text. We're on page 36 of the translation that you can get in the link below. 78b in the Stephanus numbers if you're reading along somewhere else. Let's go. Socrates is speaking. Is it not the case then that we must necessarily ask ourselves something like this? For what kind of nature is it proper to undergo this experience, that of being dispersed, and for the purpose of preventing what kind of experience is self-dispersion feared? Confusing way of writing. And what kind of nature does not undergo self-dispersion? We have the benefit of the Balboa translation for accuracy, but when we get stuck on a section that doesn't quite make sense to me like this, we can jump to the Rouse to see how it's how it might be written another way. So 78c. 78C. Pull it up. We must ask ourselves what sorts of things properly undergo this. I mean, what sorts of things are dissolved and scattered? For what sorts we must fear such an end, and for what not? Next, we must consider, that doesn't help, which sort the soul belongs to. Sorts of things are dissolved, for what sorts we must fear. Okay, so he's saying that, yeah, if that's the case, we should fear that. It sounds like he's saying that's what that. For what sorts we must fear such an end. Oh, I see. What sorts of things do we not want that to happen to? We don't mind if our, I don't know, our toaster breaks down into pieces one day. We're not afraid of that. We accept that's what's going to happen to toasters one day. But what sorts of things should we fear that kind of an end for? You know, like the soul, for instance. After this, we should examine which of the two is the soul like. And as a result of this, we should be of good cheer or fear for the sake of our soul. So he's saying it would be a rational fear if it was true that our soul did dissolve in that kind of a way. CB says what you say is true. Take notice then, on the one hand, that which is composite and is composed by its very nature properly undergoes this dispersion. Composite and composed, okay. So, composite and composed, another way of saying that would be compounded. Alright, we're not getting much help from this other translation, but I guess we can figure it out as we go. Composed and composed by its nature. Properly undergoes this, that which is composed by its nature undergoes dispersion. For this nature is divided in the same way as it was composed, came together from parts, and it will divide out from parts, into parts. Whereas on the other hand, if indeed this other something properly and separately happens to be incomposite, it will not undergo these experiences. It didn't come from pieces, it won't go into pieces. Is it not the case then, in order to do this, and for this to always exist according to the same and be maintained in the same way, it will most likely be like, akin to, these that are incomposite. But on the other hand, those which change from one state to another will never abide according to the same, and thus composite. So he's giving a kind of expression, abiding according to the same is a fancy way of saying, well, we'll stay the same. But it kind of sounds nicer, saying it will always abide according to the same. It appears to CBs to be in that way. Let us return to those same incomposite natures from which the Logos proceeded before, to see if the self-ousia, to which we granted existence by the Logos, by questions and answers. Notice, through the Logos we came to understand about self-ousia, and we got there through questions and answers, which relates to the dialectic, of course. Always has to be maintained according to the same, or whether the self-ousia varies from one state to another. Or if the self-equal, the self-beautiful, and every self-being which exists are also never susceptible to any metabolic transformation whatsoever. Or does each one of those selves that always exist, by abiding uniformly self by self, have to remain in the same way, according to the same, and must never in any way be susceptible to any alteration whatsoever? Wow, this is difficult to translate into English. I mean, that's one hell of a friggin' sentence. But we get the point. Does the self-ousias exist same by same, or do they alter? They must remain in the same way according to the same, O Socrates. On the one hand, says Cebes, on the one hand, says Socrates, what of the others, such as humans or horses or clothes or other such things whatsoever, or those that are equal or beautiful, that we give them as these words to as adjectives? All of those of the same name as those beings. A beautiful person. An equal stick. Selves neither subsisting according to the selves, nor ever according to each other. So not the self that they're named after, nor the other selves. Or to say it briefly, in no way remain according to the same. What of these things? Shoes, clothes, humans. In this way, they can never be in the same way. Is it not the case then that on the one hand, you can touch and see and perceive those with the other senses, but on the other hand, it is the case that those abiding according to the same cannot be grasped in any other way whatsoever than... This is what we're interested in. How do we grasp these ideas? Using the self-logos of understanding. The understanding. The understanding. Not Kant's philosophy or Hegel's philosophy or the Epicurean philosophy or the Stoic philosophy or this philosophy or that philosophy. You can have a list as long as your arm. All these different kinds of opinions, personal philosophy. Kinds of ways of making sense of the world. He said, we're not interested in that. We're not interested in the many particulars. We're interested in the. We're interested in excellence. We're interested in the ideal. We're interested in what is true. The understanding. A big deal for us. And we've talked about this a lot on this channel. The difference between and the. Which is in this argument, the difference between equal thing or a beautiful person. Adjectives versus substances. The beautiful, the justice, substantive. Okay, there is something called the understanding. Of course, we don't think that way in our world. We think everything's opinion. Well, not for most things, but the things that are needed for mass oppression and enslavement and exploitation, those sorts of things, like ruling, like telling people what God thinks, manipulating people, governing, and of course philosophy, because philosophy is a way to understand what is the nature of the divine and what is beyond the divine, and not through belief. So you can't be oppressed. That's why there is an aversion to this kind of philosophy in history, and why we have to awaken it to save humanity and save ourselves. It's an important game. It's fun. It's the best game in town, but it's also significant. So we don't have the idea of the understanding for spiritual things, mystic things, understanding things. And of course, if it's the model for justice, it would be what it would be like to rule a society, how to have a fair society or a just society or a beautiful society or an equal society. We're interested in equality, aren't we? So philosophy is for ruling and for governing and for ourselves and for our own personal development, our spiritual development. Of course, we hope that the humanity catches on and those in power become philosophers. That would be great for all parties involved. But we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But for us, we can do it ourselves. We can engage in the understanding. And of course, because we don't have the understanding, we use the word dianoia. Dianoia, one of our key, fantastic Greek words that we've been carrying with us all the way along. So, they cannot be grasped with our senses, see, hear, touch, but only through the logos of the understanding, dianoia, since such entities are formless and not visible. Interesting use of the word formless. We can laugh at that. Or we could boo, or we could laugh. Because That's funny to us because one of the ways philosophy is mistranslated, particularly Plato's philosophy, the philosophy, is the ideas we're talking about that we call self-ousia, or self-equal, so we call them selfers, so we give them the adjective self, so we're not talking about an adjective, but a noun that exists in a realm called being, which is before and is eternal, and I think he mentions it later on here. Where is it? Maybe a bit later. Pure, eternal, deathless, always remaining, according to the same. And we give the name to all of them, self-ousia. They have been mistranslated by the word form. They don't have form. That's why we laughed. We don't see them. We can only grasp them by using the logos through the dianoia because they are formless. So it's pretty funny that the very thing we're after in philosophy is so tragically mistranslated to be the exact thing it isn't. It is not a form, but we call them the forms. Talk to someone who's had a bit of college education in philosophy. Say, I'm interested in philosophy. Really? What's that about? It's the art and practice of death and dying, awakening your higher cognitive functions to perceive the truth, but integrating it into your being to something called phronesis, which is the kind of learning that we're all here to do, to purify ourselves from our fate, our problems, and lead us to the true destiny of all people, the destiny of man. And it's a kind of learning we can take with us into the next life, and maybe even escape the cycles of reincarnation. It's the quest of man. It's the archetype for all heroes' journeys. Really? Where are you learning that? Plato. Plato. Didn't he believe in the forms? Then we facepalm. No, it's not form. It's formless. So, a bit funny, so we go ha. But it's interesting here that in this argument about the soul, Socrates is also helping these chaps out, and us, by helping us understand the realm of forms. We don't call it forms. The realm of self-ousia, the realm of being. Socrates has a habit, actually philosophers have a habit of this, answering the question directly while also shoehorning in the more important question. The thing you really need. So if you come to the doctor with a broken finger or a sore finger, sure, the doctor will address the finger that you're in there because it's sore. But if he notices that your finger is sore because your whole arm is broken, he will also probably give you help for your broken arm. This is the more primary, this is the more significant thing. Philosophers who have an art would function in a similar way. So while we're following the argument about why the soul can't dissipate, we're also learning about the realm of being. So that's pretty cool. So let's clap for that. Because he's saying, hey, look. And by the way, I'm letting the cat out of the bag a little bit, but it's fun. I love talking about this stuff. I don't have a lot of people to talk to about this stuff because, unfortunately, philosophers are only just starting to wake up. The way in which it does. So, yeah, that's why I'm going to share what I see a little bit here. One of the ways of doing that I have noticed in my 20 years of studying this stuff, of shoehorning the more significant in, I think it's great, is using it as an analogy. It's brilliant when I've seen it in real life. It's awesome. Hey, so if we're going to understand what the soul is, right? This is where we're at now in the argument. It's cool. So cool. The argument is about understanding whether the soul is, like, if we should fear death because the soul will scatter to the wind, or if it has an eternal existence, okay? So one of the ways you could talk about that is using a metaphor or an analogy to anchor your argument and move it forward. So if the soul does break into parts because it's composite, like a physical thing, like the body, that's one option. Or it's going to be the other option. So we're going to have to use something that is eternal and immortal and doesn't scatter. Being. So, in order to answer which kind the soul is, based on this analogy, body or being, we have to first understand the body or being, so we can decide which of the two the soul is more like. Is the soul akin to the body, composite, dissolving? Is the body more akin to the beings? Self-ousia, which involves self-being, self-beauty, self-justice, and all those self-equal, and all the things we're after. Do you see it? Do you see the trick? In order to understand this thing, we have to first understand this higher thing. So let's spend all our time understanding this higher thing, which is better. Let's mend our arm instead of the sore finger that's only sore because you've got a broken arm. So let's sneak in a whole conversation about the nature of being. The higher question that they could have asked, the boys could have asked, had they not been blocked by their fear of death. This is what he's been talking about. Purification and perfection. That's what we have been talking about the whole time. The dialectic applied to both your problems and your logos. So, if the goal is to follow the logos up to the self-destiny, the destiny of man, your destiny and all living things' destiny, apparently even the destiny of sticks, if that's our goal. But we're human beings, so we have a block as well. We've got the logos and the shadow of the logos, the dialectic and the shadow of the dialectic, our destiny and the shadow, our fate, the self and the false ideas about self, the logos and the pathologos. If we have two, which we do because we're humans, then there might be a fear here that is fixating you, that is distracting you, that's preventing you from asking a higher question. So instead of asking, oh, Socrates, this is your last day on earth, let's talk about the realm of being. Well, I'm actually more concerned about the soul, because that's what I had this block about. I have this false belief about the soul being scattering to the wind. And I recognize it's probably a childhood belief from a childhood mythology. So I'm going to say, speak to me like a child, like your, what was the word? Attempt to persuade this inner child not to fear death, just as if death were a momolukria, a boogeyman, a Mormon Lucia, a Mormon with leukemia. A boogeyman that's a Greek, ancient Greek boogeyman. So he recognizes this, but we can too. We have our blocks that limit us from doing philosophy. We have the things that drag us into our vices. Our illusions, our fears, our feelings of inadequacies, of not being good enough, all these negative ideas of the self that prevent us from learning the true awesomeness of the self, or even pursuing that as the most meaningful goal. So we can really relate to this chap. It's the human problem. Also, what's curious is if you've been with this channel from the start, we had before we jumped into the Phaedo, we were in the Parmenides, which is Socrates at the beginning of his philosophical life, where he first learned about the importance of this logos through dianoia called the dialectic. And he said, oh, it's really complicated, from his teacher, Parmenides. Oh, Parmenides, this dialectic that you say we have to practice. Let's bring up a quote just because we're talking about it. We kept some quotes from that read-along. This was one. This dialectic that we have to do to collect ourselves together, but appears useless to the many. We would say NPCs nowadays, but the multitude, and is called by them empty talk that we have to do while we're young, otherwise the truth will elude you. This thing. Can you give me an example? Because it's been quite difficult to understand. He could have picked anything. Can you give me a dialectic on justice? Could you give me a dialectic on beauty? All the things we're interested in. Hey, dialectic on the soul, so I know it's immortal, so I'm not going to fear death. He could have picked that. Socrates went for the highest. He said, can you give me one on the self? really illuminate something about who this person was, the Socrates guy was. What kind of a person does that? Surely he had blocks that he worked on through his life. But even at 19, he went for the highest. Do it on the self. The self, which is a necessary precondition for self-ousia, self-beauty, self-justice. Hey, if we call them all selves, there must be something more primary and causal beyond even self-being, beyond even being. So that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty awesome. So yeah, Socrates as a man himself is a puzzle. And by the way, we'll get into the apology where he talks about how he was he's a special kind of a person sent from God. Pretty cool. Anyway, so most people don't do that, and our friend Seabeast is like, hey, help me understand why the soul is immortal, slay this childhood fear of the boogeyman, our fear of death, which almost everybody has, so he's not bad. We can relate to him. But of course, there's a special thing that philosophers sometimes do where they sneak in the higher as a necessary precondition to understand the lower. You want to understand the soul? Let's learn about being. So let's keep that in mind as we go. Let's do both. Why not? Get offered two, take both. So we've got a principle to live by. Same thing for ordering desserts. That was a dumb joke. I take back that joke. That was such a dad joke. Same thing for ordering desserts. Pretend I didn't say that. Okay, let's get back into the text. So he's already said, hey, we have to compare these two things, the body or self-ousia, which exists. So we're getting a list of things that we can take notes for and then put in our dialectic, make our own dialectic of being. What is being? Self-ousia. How do you grant exist? How do you know that it has pure existence? Through the logos. How do you do that? Through questions and answers. Interesting. It's maintained. It's always the same. And it maintains its sameness. Does not vary. Self-equal, self-beautiful. Every self-being that exists are all the same. Has the same hypoxis or head. Is not susceptible for transformation. So beings don't change. Abiding uniformly, self by self. It can maintain its own existence on its own. Doesn't need something else for energy or power. Remains in the same way according to the same. Doesn't change according to alteration. Now, let's talk about clothes and shoes and humans that we would use these same terms like equal and beautiful to as adjectives. They're in total contrast to those beings. Now, let's go back to the beings. You want to understand the soul? Learn about being first. Go higher. That's cool. I love that. You use the logos to grasp them, not the senses, which helps us understand more about why Socrates was talking about separating from the body as much as we can. What's the word he said? Not despising, but paying little heed to things of the physical body. Only eating or whatever, or dealing with clothes and food and that sort of thing as much as is necessary. Wear as much clothes as you need to not get kicked out of the library, that kind of thing. Because it's through the dianoia that we grasp them, and it's also formless, and it's also not visible. Are you willing then to set up these two kinds of beings, one that is visible and another kind formless? And we laugh because one of the great betrayals is not defining the word idea as idea, but as forms, because it's actually formless. And we laugh because we're hilarious philosophers. Let's set this up. On the one hand, the formless always remaining according to the same, whereas on the other hand, the visible never remaining according to the same. Everything in the visible world is in change, never stays the same. That's curious. Of course, we've learned this through physics by now. Like we know everything's in flux. Everything is growing and decaying. Even before physics, we kind of knew that, didn't we? Come along then. Let's set this up. Come along then. One part of ourselves is the body. The other part is the soul. None other. To which idea then shall we say the body is more alike and akin? CB says that is clear to everyone. That is more alike and akin to the visible. The body is like the visible. Socrates asks, what about the soul? Is it visible or formless? CB says not visible. So he's not giving it a positive and saying formless. He's saying it's not visible. That's good. That's integrity. He doesn't know what the soul is yet, but he knows that it's not visible. Not visible to human beings, Socrates. But we do speak of such things that are naturally visible to human vision, and also of those that are not naturally visible. Or does it seem to apply to any others? To those visible are what we see with human vision. What then do we say about the soul? Is she visible or invisible? Have you ever seen a soul? You seen a soul? You ever been walking down the street and bump into somebody's soul? Oop, I didn't see you there. No, not visible. Accordingly then, she is formless. Yes. Accordingly then, the soul is more like the formless than the body. Than body is. While on the other hand, the body is more like the visible. This is altogether necessary, and we highlight that because it's one of the criteria for what should change our mind in arguments. It necessarily follows. It didn't say, oh yes, that's what I learnt when I was a kid. That's what I grew up with. That's what all my friends say. In fact, we're trying to purify ourselves from what we learnt as a kid. The boogeyman. The childhood fears. That's not motivating us to change our mind. Necessary does. One of the aspects is necessary. Is it also the case then that we are stated the following not long ago, that when the soul on the one hand makes use of the body to investigate something, either by seeing or hearing or through some other sense, for this is to investigate something through the perceptions of the body, at that time she is dragged about by the body to things that are never abiding according to the same. Oh my goodness. And so self wanders about and is confused and dizzy, just as if self were drunk. That's a cool metaphor to explain what it's like to be dragged around with the body, insofar as self comes in contact with those things. You're the sort of person who's what's the expression I heard somebody use on Twitch the other day? Sort of person that responds to colors and shapes. Right? Interested in visible things. That's being drunk. Yourself is drunk. Whereas on the other hand, when she truly investigates self according to self, the first line of our dialectic, self according to self, she passes into that realm that is pure. So we're learning about that realm. It's a clue. Can't give it purple because it's purple on top. Let's give it green. This is the understanding the higher to figure out the lower. Oh, that realm, that's the one we're interested in. Being. The place we go when we die. And before they bury us, if we practice dying while we're alive. Because we're philosophers. What's that realm? Pure and eternal and deathless and remains and abides in the same way. Add all of these qualities to your notes and then make a dialectic out of it. Do a dialectic on that realm. Why? Because you'd be doing an investigation with the logos, using your understanding. And why do you want to do that? It will allow you to pass into that realm. It's all in the text. We're not adding anything. We're not leaving anything out. We're not interpreting. We're seeing what's there. That's reading. You pass into that realm, the thing that all people actually seek. Isn't that cool?
Wow.
Wow.
So add these to your list. Oh, and have fun with it and share it with the community. We have a YouTube channel you can add comments on. We have a Discord channel you can join and share your dialectics. And if it worked, share what that realm was like. Don't stop there. Keep going. And if you turn your dialectic into mythology, make a song out of it or art out of it, or you use I like the Marvel superheroes. So if I might, that might be what I do. But if you have like a universe you're attracted to, the Harry Potter universe, the Star Wars universe, some video game universe, a lot of people, or a few people who follow the channel, like World of Warcraft, make a story or fan fiction or a flash game to using those characters and their relationships to represent these ideas and their relationships. Have fun with it. What ideas? Purity, eternality, deathlessness, the relationship of always abiding in the same way. So, yeah, and support each other. That's the game.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
And by always, so, on the one hand, when she, your soul, you, truly investigates self, according to self, she passes into that realm.
Wow.
That is pure.
Wow.
And eternal.
Wow.
And deathless.
Wow.
And abides in the same way.
Wow.
And by being always akin with self.
Wow.
She also becomes that whenever she arises into self according to self. And goes out. Interesting. Goes out of what? Go out of your body? Self both ceases from wandering.
Wow.
And always remains according to the same in the same way.
Wow.
About those beings insofar as she remains in contact with such beings.
Wow.
And this experience or state of being of self is called mindfulness, phronesis. That's the one that we've been after. Philosophers are after truth, which is the dialect we just did, but also phronesis. And if you always remain in contact with the beings, that is a state of self called phronesis. Ceasing from your drunken wandering, and you always remain there in that realm that is pure, eternal, and deathless. Wow. So we talked about, let's go to our notes. We talked about how this transition into phronesis from the virtues to the more divine virtue. This is the wrong one. What? I'm going to load up the other notes. This is the notes from Parmenides. We talked about how, there we go. That's a good opening screen. The triad of the self. We use the self logos to reach self being that we were just talking about, learning about. And of course, ultimately, we want to go from there to continue what we learned of the Logos to reach even beyond that to the one self. Which you can't, you don't have to believe exists, which is one of the reasons why there is this counterattack, why we're in the process of reawakening philosophy. Because one of the problems authority figures have with philosophy is you don't have to convince somebody that they have a self. So if the ultimate term is the self, you don't have to believe someone. You have to join a church. You don't have to pay tithe. And of course, you can't sneak in your own manipulation. Oh, by the way, God wants you to attack these people. God wants you to give me money. Why? Because it's faith. You just have to believe. You don't have to believe you have a self. And if there is an inherent logos in the self, you wouldn't even have to believe, because it's understanding. If self logos is inherent to the self, which of course we are learning. Still loading up. I've got a little rainbow colored ball showing me that this is low. So actually, let's pull it up in the text ball. This was the section on initiation. Certain rite of initiation. We talked about these 4 virtues that are traded in for the only valid currency. Give it green. The currency that we trade in these virtues for is for phronesis. What are the 4 virtues? Wisdom, courage, sound-mindedness, and justice. Or being and vitality, sound-mindedness, and the word is justice. One likes to call it righteousness for some reason. The true virtues are when they are united with phronesis. And of course, they become these new virtues, which is one of the fantastic things about Balboa, is we can actually see the text for what it is and discover the puzzles. Somehow, those 4 become these 4. And we notice one changes. Sound-mindedness stays the same. Justice stays the same. Vitality, which was the quality of courage, stays the same. But being goes from wisdom to self. So, what does that mean? Let's go to our notes. That means that... Oh, here is that outlined in our notes. The rite of initiation. You might be familiar with this. Well, if we can prescribe these virtues to these aspects of the soul, which is another triad, which is why we have our skill trees. You can rub the 2 sticks together to gain new insights. One insight was, hang on a second. How can he say what he just said in the text? Which was what? This part here. He just said that when we get there, when we reach this realm that is pure, eternal, deathless, always the same, remaining the same, abiding the same, dude abides in the same, akin with the self. So your being is always like the self. It's the thing that is most like the self, this realm of being. Ceases from your wandering, your problems, your drunkenness, all of the foolishnesses and the problems that we are trying to escape from. You always remain there, according to the same. And in the same way, so long as you remain in contact with such beings. So long as you can stay in contact, you always stay that way. And this is a state of self called phronesis. So philosophers seek truth in phronesis, the kind of state. How can you always remain in being if we're doing it while still being alive? Like Socrates, right now. Well, he's dead now, but in the text at the time. Well, this is a puzzle. And what's one way we solve puzzles? We find our skill trees and we rub 2 sticks together to see what comes to light, if it can trigger a spark. So we talked about how Socrates is giving us a clue. He said these 4 just these 4 virtues that we develop, we put in through habits and practice: justice, wisdom, courage, sound-mindedness. He said, by the way, rub this on our skill tree of 3s, our triad skill tree. That's one branch, the triad. Here's another branch: being, power, vitality, and activity. That's another triad. Rub them together, because that's what I'm doing here. If I rub them together, I can swap. I could say courage, or I could say vitality. I could say wisdom, or I can say being. He's rubbing them together. He's given us a clue on how to solve this mystery. And I hope I'm not letting too much out of the bag, but I suppose if you've watched along this far, I don't know, you've proved yourself. I don't know. That's one of my puzzles. How much should I say? I don't want to ruin somebody's puzzle. I don't want to ruin the riddle. I don't want to, what's it called when you're in chat and you, backseat. I don't want to spoil. But also I don't want to keep my love of philosophy to myself. So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out that line. Perhaps I'll learn more as I grow. But for now, I'm sharing with this particular one. I think it's a key one, and I think it will help and will roll on for further puzzles. So fingers crossed. So he's recognizing, hey, two branches of our skill tree. Well, then how can we stay always connected to the realm of being in a state of self called phronesis? Well, if he's given us a clue, often, by the way, here's another cool thing. One of the ways the puzzles are given, and we've actually talked about this before, is you give 2 of something to establish a pattern, and then because 2 is enough, and then you let people figure out the rest. I'm interested in songwriting. I'm a musician, and that's something that happens in songwriting. And the simplest explanation of that is a limerick. I think a lot of children's, like 1 paragraph children's songs follow that structure. 2, limerick. There was a man from Nantucket who something in a bucket. And then the third one is a difference. So 2 establishes sameness, third is difference. He went to the man, he said, if you can you please, and then something that rhymes with bucket. So 2 establishes a pattern, the third is a variation, and then the after the variation, there should be some integration from that variation to a new way of being, which is the hero's journey. You go from somewhere which is familiar. So in order to establish the place which is familiar, needs to be something familiar. So you need a lot of instances. But if you've got 2, that's enough. You need at least 2 to establish a pattern. Then you have to go on the hero's journey, which is something new, which is a third thing. That's a new journey. And then you go back around to where you started. But this new, you have gone back to the new place, but it's changed in some way, which is the hero's journey, which is also kind of what we're doing here. If we were remembering what we once knew, then we once knew it. So we have our life. That's our patterns, everyday life patterns. And then we do something new. That's philosophy. But having gone through philosophy, when we return to our everyday life, we look at our problems in a new way. We relate to our everyday world in a new way. We're not chasing shapes and colors. We recognize that all physical things serve a purpose to point to the realm of being. Another way of looking at it is, well, if we knew everything to begin with, if we always remained according to the same, so there's our remaining, well, we don't need 1,000,000 of them if we can just use 2 to establish that that's our standard. We reincarnate into this life, go through something different, In fact, that's the physical world. It's all about differences. But then we remember, or we learn, which is a remembering back what we once knew. And our question is, why? If we knew it to begin with, why go through this physical incarnation? In this everyday life, with all of its injustices, apparent physical injustices, on the surface at least, it appears unjust. There might be a greater justice when you can see eternity. But for now, most human beings can recognize there's genocide, there's capitalism, there's exploitation, there's planetary destruction of the environment. So many things wrong. Why go through this? If our purpose as human beings and philosophers is to remember what we once knew, this might help us with that question. Maybe we're going back to see what was there, but we see it in a new way. And of course, there's a greater question: if everything is from the self, emanates from the self to return to the self, that triad, everything abides in self, emanates from self, and returns to self, which is another triad. Add that to your triad tree, by the way, if that made sense. If not, we'll run into that later. That's a key term. I think it's a proposition of Proclus's elements of Plato's theology. Anyway, it's a basic principle of philosophy that everything abides in self, emanates from self, and returns to self. It's another triad. Then again, same question. Why leave only to go through the logos, dianoia, questions and answers, dialectic, only to return? That's a puzzle. Puzzle I've had for a long time too. It's a good question. Came up in chat a week ago. To learn the same thing from another... Yeah, whoa, yes. From the chat. To learn the same thing from another perspective. That's a good answer. I also like that you put a question mark on it as well, because it's both a question and a hypothesis, so it can tick, because we want to carry a stack of ifs in our inventory, which are our hypothesis, and we also want to carry a stack of questions. That was really well phrased. I think the answer is humor. Oh, that's another one. Yes, because that's the I was using limericks and songwriting as an example, but I bet you could make the same analogy using how the structure of humor works. And yeah, if you do, share it. Share it on Discord if you're join Discord. I'm still working on Discord. I used a template that I got from another streamer, but there's like 1 million rooms, and I don't think our community is big enough for 1 million rooms, so I might just make it one single Discord room. If you're somebody watching this and you're familiar with Discord and you've had some experience and you want to share that, please let me know. But I might just make it a single room. But yeah, if you come up with something to connect this question with how humor works, which is the same thing we're talking about, how can you understand the lesser humor by looking at the greater, which is the idea of emanation and return, or vice versa. Use your philosophical understanding to do a little hypothesis or essay on understanding how humor works. And then, hey, mythologize it, make some funny jokes. But yeah, like a nice input. So, rubbing sticks together. So our question is, well, how do we stay in self-renaissance? Because in the text it said, so long as we always remain in contact with the beings, we always remain there, which is curious. So this is this weird interplay between timelessness and our physical world. When you're there, you're always there. And if you know people who've had a trip or had a near-death experience or something like that, they often talk about experiencing an eternity. They're like, dude, you're out for 10 minutes. Oh, I lived a whole nother life. Kind of like a dream. So this is a weird thing. Once you're there, you're always there, but you have to be able to remain in contact with it. That's phronesis. So we're not just interested in truth, says Socrates. We're interested in phronesis, which is some sort of integration, requiring that initiation, which requires us to have been developing and practicing our virtues. Which brings us back here to this. So, what's another stick that we can rub up against these two sticks, that triad and this triad, to understand this puzzle? Well, how about the triad of the soul? The soul has a inward desiring part. That's the biggest part of the snowman. The Taoists represent the belly, use the belly to represent that. The belly. And then the outward moving, that which seeks to act in the world, decides to click on this podcast. That's the heart in the Taoist tradition. And of course, the smallest part of our body, our soul, is the head. Of course, this is itself a metaphor. Obviously, it's not physical, but this is a metaphor to represent the soul. Planning part, an outward moving and an inward desiring part. That's the soul. So, if we were to rub the two sticks together, what would we get? Well, sound-mindedness is a kind of activity, maybe. So it's related to the activity triad. Sound-mindedness is managing your desires. We saw the shadow or the vice version of sound-mindedness is mastering some desires so you can be better at others. But we want to seek the desire that the planning part. We want this to rule that. So you can say, oh yeah, okay, that fits. This virtue relates to our desiring part. The next part on that, so here we're picking up this triangle and we're putting it on that triangle. That's sound-mindedness. Courage, yeah, that's an outward moving. In fact, we called it vitality. So we could say courage, we could say our vitality or our virility, or we could say the outward moving part. Wisdom pertains to being. Of course, we recognize that it's the logos about being. That's what dianoia is. That's what we should be using to plan our life. But also we have a part of our soul that's different from that which desires for our physical body or that which moves in our everyday world. There's a part of our soul that's just reasoning. Now, does this help our question? Can we have one part of the soul always in contact with being? This part of the soul always in contact with being. And if we defined wisdom as the logos applied to being, the upgrade from wisdom to self-phronesis as a state could be when that reasoning part is no longer relating to being through the logos, but is connected. Of course, you need the logos to apprehend that which you're connected to, which is why the true mystic tradition is philosophy and not anything else that does not go through the logos. But that does seem to be one possible hypothesis. This is just an if. I'm having fun making an if for the question. Oh, and turn it into a question, like in the chat. Could it be that? Could it possibly be that the upgrade that he's talking about as the initiation that allows you to self-phronesis as a state, could it be that we can always be connected to being? Because the physical world isn't that part of the soul that can connect to being. We don't see being. He just said we do not contact being through our physical senses. So we can still have an outward moving part of our soul, moving our body outwardly. We still have an inward desiring part of our soul, making sure we eat enough sandwiches, while the part of our soul that is of its nature to contact being can always remain there. that could be a possible hypothesis. So that's a question and a hypothesis. So, but it's a good question because he's saying that state is phronesis, and that's what that means, to always be in contact with that being, which would be nice. If all of our fears of our soul dying come from forgetting that realm of being there might squash that fear, kill that fear, or at least significantly reduce that fear so that we can engage in the logos and dialectic to find the cause of that fear from our childhood mythology to really remove it. Significantly diminish the effect of that false belief. And of course, when you're all the way there, phronesis. What does CB say to that argument? What you say is altogether, the word is beautiful. Beautifully said. So he is using something that we just prescribed to the realm of being, self-beautiful. He's using that as a standard to even judge the logos, adding more like a self-referring idea that even to have this argument proves the argument in a fascinating way. So he said necessary back here, and then he said beautiful here. So these seems to be the criteria that he keeps using. Beautifully said and true. Kind of makes sense if beauty is one of those aspects of truth. We have a comment from the translator. Let's check it out. Concerning this passage, Thomas Taylor informs us that for Olympiodorus, the term wandering is common to both life and knowledge, but the term confused belongs to this life alone, and the term dizzy to knowledge alone. But dizziness is a defect. For those who are thus affected through the inward whirl which they experience, think that things external to them are in a similar condition. So the soul, beholding only sensibles, thinks that all things flow and are in motion. Olympiodorus also inquires how Plato calls phronesis a passion or affection of the soul, to which he replies that all virtues are passions. For it is evident, says he, that we looked it up and it was state, I think we said. He includes state as well. Because all things which participate, suffer, are in a passive state. Hence also being considered as participating the one is said by Plato to suffer or be passive to the one. Since therefore the soul partakes of the intelligence or phronesis which subsists in the intellect, or in other words, of intellectual phronesis, on this account he calls phronesis the passion of the soul. Or we may say that since the whole soul is through the whole of self, self-motive, so far self moves self, self acts is wholly active, but insofar as self is moved externally, self suffers. All right, so what he's talking about here is the one of the definitions of soul is self-motive, that which moves itself. But he's distinguishing being self-motive with being moved externally. In the Old English, the word suffer was used. It doesn't mean torture. You suffer an experience. You have an experience. You're passive. So it's passive or active. Now he's saying that all the virtues are passive, and being, so this realm of being he's adding, so keep that in mind, but being is considered as the one that participates in self. That's the second hypothesis that we started before we jumped in here. So it's not the one that is beyond being, it's the one that participates or experiences the self. So the realm of being is also of self, which of course makes sense of this thing that Parmenides gave us. If we're going to do this dialectic, we have to permit the ideas of real beings to be, keep your mind fixed on your objections or counterattacks, define each one of the particular ideas that we've been talking about, that's dianoia, but you also have to allow that the idea of each one of the real beings is always of the self. This is the power of dialectics. So he's pointing out that even being is experiencing the self. So that's why he calls it an affectation or a passion. It's curious. So the soul is experiencing being, giving the state of phronesis, just as being experiences the one. All right, something to puzzle about, but that's an addition from the translator. So, to remain in contact with these beings always causes you to cease from your wandering in that realm that is pure, eternal, deathless, and always abiding according to the same. That state of self is phronesis. Beautifully said and true. Socrates continues. Then in turn, from what we have seen before and from what we are saying, to which of those two does it appear the soul is more alike or more akin? So that's that fun thing. He just laid out a whole bunch of awesome stuff. By the way, he said, what are the two things philosophers are interested in? Truth, which is being, and phronesis. He just talked about being and he talked about phronesis. So he, in his doctrine, Sebi should have asked about those two things. He didn't. He asked about the soul. But Socrates grandfathered them in, if I'm using that word right, or if I'm grandfathering that term in incorrectly. He snuck it in. He said, hey, let's talk about these two things. That's what phronesis is. This is what being is. And which of those two is the soul more alike? To me, it seems that everyone would yield to this same type of method, even the dullest of men, that the soul is wholly and altogether more like that which always abides in the same way, rather than that which it is not. So next time you catch up with your friends for coffee or a beer or whatever, or a barbecue, say, oh, by the way, is the soul more akin to self-being that when we use, what was it, that we don't see with the eyes, but when we use our logos through dianoia and questions and answers, what we call a dialectic, we can contact, and in doing so we cease from our problems. We're no longer like our soul's no longer drunk and dizzy and confused, and we can always remain in that same way, in contact with the beings, in a realm that is pure, eternal, and deathless. Is the soul more like, and by the way, when we do that, we're always in that state. It's a state of being that we can take with us, even into the afterlife, so that we don't enter the afterlife if in the mud. So it's kind of the only reason, like the reason we're here. And we call that state of self-phronesis. Is the soul more like that realm of being that causes the state of phronesis? Or is the soul more like the body that is made up of parts and can scatter to the wind when we die? Ask your friends that next time you catch up for a coffee, beer, or barbecue. And if they don't say it's all, the soul is wholly and altogether more like being, then you can say that if they don't say that, then they are stupider than even the dullest of men. The CBS is saying, hey, even the dullest of men would say that the soul is more like being. So you've got a nice insult for your friends. If they don't agree with you, call them duller than the dullest of men. How to be a load of fun at a party. Calling everyone dull. All right. Obviously, don't do it that way. What then about the body? CB says it's more alike and akin to the other, the composite. Look at it also in this way then, that whenever soul and body are in the self, nature orders the one to serve as the subject and to be ruled, and the other to rule and be the master or mistress. Oh, let's just say master. This goes back to here. We talked about the parts of the soul, and there's a planning state. He's also saying ruling. So we could say, we can have another triad with ruling. Let's make another one over here. Let's go this color. Ruling. Of course, yeah, ruling kind of fits here, but it's not exactly planning. So maybe there's another triad that we would come up, like down the line, we'll find more terms. What's the ruling term? There's another term here. And these two, of course, are ruled by this. Makes sense because, and by the way, we can use this to understand our virtues. If there is this triad, can we say that sound-mindedness is ruled by wisdom? Do we desire what wisdom wants? Is courage ruled by wisdom? Do we hold on to with courage what wisdom says in the Logos about being? And of course, we're applying it to the soul now. So we're using this triad to understand this triad. We're rubbing these two sticks together. This planning part of our soul, does it rule the outward moving and the inward desiring part of our soul? So we're already like there. We're right with them. They're good for us. Is there one part to be ruled and the other to rule? And according to this, be ruled and the other to rule. According to this, which one in term seems to be like the divine and which is like the mortal? So we're using likeness again. So we're using analogy to think and solve puzzles here. So like the divine or like the mortal? Or does it not seem... Let's actually make this whole thing. Or does it not seem to you, on the one hand, that it is in nature... I keep saying on the one hand. Does it not seem to you that it is in nature, the nature of the divine, to be able to rule and lead? Whereas it is the nature of the mortal to be ruled and serve as a subject. He mentioned this before. He said that we are we have masters of... He said, oh, where did it go? This is back at page 10. When he said, hey, follow me to the place where I'm going as quick as you can, but you must not kill yourself until God, you have to, beforehand, until God should send some necessity to do so, just as one. Right, so don't kill yourself beforehand. You have to wait until God, gives you the thumbs up. Someone else, and he says, and somebody else has to do the deed themselves. The reason is, God is our superintendent, our master, and we are his possessions. Let's highlight that. God is our superintendent or master. God is our Super Nintendo, and we are his possessions. For it is not reasonable that those who are mindful, and we see the keyword phronesis in there, should not resent leaving this service in which the gods, who are the best overseers, the best masters of the real beings, are watching over us. So the gods even are the best masters of beings, and they're ruling us. He also, these good rulers. And I'll be present with those gods that are wise and good, and humans who have completed their life better than those here. I shall be in the company of gods who are altogether good masters. This is the start of his doctrine. Similarly, through these doctrines, the result is I am not resentful, but I have good hope that there's something in store for those who have completed life. We've been talking about this, completing our work here, escaping the cycles of death and rebirth. And indeed, just as has been said from ancient times, is much better from the good than the corrupt. So, this idea of good masters have been all the way through. Even from the beginning. So the divine is able to rule and lead, whereas the mortal is to be ruled just like a possession. We talked about the Roomba. We are like the Roomba of God, but we're also on a tour of duty. There's a reason why we're here. We all have a reason for being here. Philosophy is, as we've been saying, we're all philosophers innately, just like we all know knowledge innately, but many of us are ignorant or unaware. Ignorant, of course, is to believe something that you take to be knowledge that isn't, and you get attached to that. We call it Dunning-Kruger effect, or our vices, or our pathologos, cause of our injustices. I am so certain about that which I'm wrong about that I'm willing to kill, right? Or become a dragon and not pay taxes and sit on billions of dollars. All of these injustices. People think that they're right. Or we're unaware. So we all have knowledge. Our job here is to become philosophers, which is to learn this and do what we're here for. And also has the side effect of purifying our problems, so we're also going to be less of a jerk, which is good. Thumbs up for that. So, we all have knowledge innately, which was a metaphor to understand something we're reading here. What? Talking about Roombas, weren't we? I lost my train of thought. So, right, there's a part of us that is like the divine that can be a ruler. Our soul. The nature of the divine is to be able to rule and lead, whereas, yes. So I think I was saying, just like we all know knowledge, we're just here to remember it. So too, are we just like philosophers? We just have to realize that we are. So we're just learning the game. So the nature of the mortal is to be ruled and serve as its subject. That is so. Which is the soul resemble? It is truly clear, Socrates, that the soul resembles the divine. But on the other hand, the body resembles the mortal. Likeness. Using likeness to learn. To remember. Your soul is like the divine. And the good ruler. Truly consider, O Cebes, if the following results from all that has been said by us. On the one hand, the soul herself is most like the divine and is deathless and intelligible. So here's some more for that dialectic we've been building. Deathless and intelligible and uniform and indissoluble. Indissoluble? What kind of word's that? not dissoluble. Yeah, well, I've never heard dissoluble before. Look up this one. Dissoluble, capable of being dissolved. Oh, simple enough. Indissolvable. Why don't they just say indissoluble? And always abiding according to the same in the same way. So, the divine is what? Deathless, intelligible, uniform, always abiding to, indissolvable, always abiding according to the same in the same way. And our soul is like that. Our body is most like that which is human and mortal and multiform. Okay, so he's helping us out. He's giving us the negative side of the dialectic. You don't just want to know what being is, you want to know what would follow, what kind of universe would follow if beings didn't exist. If the academics were right about philosophy. Not all of them, of course. Most of them. In the European, in the Latin tradition, which takes away the, so there's no being. It's just physical stuff. Opinions, Kant's opinions, Hegel's opinions, and so on and so on. You get it. Well, the soul would be mortal and multiform and unintelligible and dissolvable and never abiding to the same. So that would be in the negative side, the part B of your dialectic. Or you can include it in part A if you want to say what is true. Let's say, so you're doing a dialectic on being. Let's do one. Get down to where we are, down here. So dialectic on being, just from this text here. Dialectic on being. We start by self according to self. What will we say about being itself? Well, we can split it down into a triad. We can say what's true about it. And we would say deathless, intelligible, intel, IG, IB, IG, IB, uniform, indissoluble, which is stupid to say indissolvable. Oh, maybe it's because the E and the A. Anyway. Always abiding, always abides, always. Abides, always abides according to the same. Of course, this is one of those self-er terms from the Parmenides. In the same way. In the Greek, the word same is similar to or almost the same as the word self. So we can see same according to the same in the same way. Self according to self in the self way. That's an interesting thing there. But you could also say, what is false about it? What would you never say is true about the beings, if beings exist? Well, we would not say it's like human. We would never say it's like human. And mortal. And multiform. Multipass. Multiform. And unintelligible. And dissolvable. Dissolvable. Probably spelled wrong. Dissolvable. And never abides according to the same. So you could put it on the B side. This is if being is on this side. Side A. If. Notice if hypothesis. For our hypothesis sac. If being is. Which of course we know means exists. Or you could put this inside B. Where if being doesn't exist. Or you can say true, false. And there'd be a third category, which is true and false. You can be a bit more creative with this one. Like what is true in one way but false in another way? What's being? It's. You could say we could just bring in mastership. It's a master. It's our master. Our master. Which is true in one way for philosophers practicing the virtues, especially in a space. Let's write that better. Practicing the virtues, especially self-phronesis. That's really like being. But not for people what would you say, non-philosophers who are ruled by passions, images. Oh, he calls it illusions in the text. Let's use the text. Illusions or vices of the body. That's fun. So we can say, see how we had a bit of fun here? Like, what can you say is true and false? Well, it's if being exists, what can you say about? Oh, actually, no. See, this would be in the category of self to others because we're saying in relation to others, it's our master. That would be self according to others. So I screwed up a bit there. So we'd have to find self according to itself, what's both true and false. What can we say about it itself? Because mastership is a relationship, which means it goes self to others. That's the third category. So I have to move that down out of the way a little bit. It's a good example. Whoops. It's a good example of true and false. So what can we say is both true and both true and false about being itself? Let me think. True and false. Do we have anything in the text here? What's both true and false about the divine itself? According to itself. Pure, eternal, deathless. Oh, these things we could add in, of course. Visible? We could say visible maybe here, because it's not visible to human vision, so in that way it's false, but it is grasped through the logos. Yeah, that works. See, it doesn't really matter. As long as it's true, it doesn't have to exactly fit, because the more you go, the more you'll realize, oh, actually, see, look, you could go back and you're actually here. Later on, when we know more about the dialectic, we can say, you know what? Just like we realized that this was actually in the wrong category, maybe we'll go, see, I wouldn't put this in the category about what's false about it itself. I would say what's true about it. Or maybe we'll go, hang on a second. We're repeating ourselves. Indissolvable, dissolvable. Maybe because that's a negative, we could rule that out. I'm not sure yet. Maybe we as we go more into our reading together, we'll see more about the dialectic and we'll find more rules. But here, for now, it seems to work that we can say it's graspable. Graspable. So, through logos, what was the expression? The logos of the understanding. Let's use the text as accurately as we can without adding or subtracting. The logos of the dianoia, but not through PHYSICAL physical senses. So that's both true and false, graspable. So that's cool. So we can, so we're doing all right with dialectic on being. So, because we've recognized the significance of the dialectic by recognizing in this text, he's saying, hey, questions and answers, a self by itself, away from the senses. These are all big clues that he's saying dialectic. I don't think he's actually used the word dialectic. Let me see. He hasn't used the word dialectic yet. That's just a comment by the translator. So the translator recognizes it. But because of our work in the Parmenides first, we had the term and we had those quotes that we pulled out. So we can recognize all of these clues that he's giving about the doctrine and the yoga of separating the soul from the body, and that which is our spiritual, mystical quest, and that which is a learning that we need to take with us to complete our work here. Because we know that, we can see the dialectic, and now we can see, oh, hang on a second, here is a list of terms about what the divine is. And here's a list of terms about what the divine ain't. I can't do green on green. Go blue. That's not good either. Make it yellow again. It ain't these things. And we can realize, oh, that's what's true and what's false about it. either in what's true and false in this sense. In each of the 4 categories, you can say what's true, what's false, and what's true and false. Or it can be side B, if being isn't. If being does not exist, and the physicalists or the materialists or the reductionists or the European philosophers and the Aristotelians and all these sorts of people that we usually learn philosophy from at school, if they were right and being doesn't exist, then these things would follow. Which could also be, well, if philosophy is art and practice of death and dying to apprehend truth and being and also integrate it into a self-state called phronesis, then you could be saying if philosophy doesn't exist. So it's curious that we are learning about what philosophy is and what it isn't, and we're getting a really cool way of nailing down what it isn't. Anything other than this is what philosophy isn't, even if you give it the name philosophy. Which is cool and interesting. And yeah, well, it might hurt some people's feelings, but, you know, if they are true philosophers, they would like to learn the truth. And they would like themselves to be freed from their ignorance, even if they're getting a paycheck or whatever. You know, find a way of doing both. In other words, don't take it personally that Socrates is saying, if you think that the soul is multiform, unintelligible, dissolvable, and never abiding according to the same, that's not philosophy. And it's also if being doesn't exist. So, you know, and be nice about it. Don't be a jerk about it. And I'm, you know, I whenever I say this, I like to say it because I don't like when ignorance is being passed off as truth, and I see the implications that we've covered already that follow if we don't do philosophy. And I don't like genocide and war and stuff. People drunk and, as it said here, the war, civil discord and battles and illusions and foolishness. I don't like that. So I would like to say, hey, this is not philosophy. And these are the things that follow if you don't do philosophy, or if you teach non-philosophy as philosophy. But on the other hand, is a real big puzzle. How do you present the truth to human beings when there is a natural byproduct of our evolution to react negatively to the truth? They killed Socrates. People don't like being wrong because often in our society we punish people for being wrong. Throw them in jail, give them a bad grade, fire them from their job, etc. If you're wrong, can't make a mistake. It's bullshit. But on the other hand, I don't want to lose friends. And it's a journey of discovering the cause of your problems and learning the virtues so you can be okay with learning the truth, even if it's not what's familiar. It's what we've been doing. So good on everybody in this journey with me. And and I'm acknowledging that it takes virtues, it takes courage, it takes patience, it takes a certain sort of person to come along this way and challenge everything we grew up in. So round of applause to all of you. But also it's a puzzle. How do we present the truth in a way that acknowledges that we're human? And there might be a counterattack, even if it's against our best interest. How does a doctor present a diagnosis in a way the patient can hear and benefit? That's a puzzle. Maybe mythology will help. I'm not sure, I don't know. But we can't lie about it. And we don't have a lot of time to pussyfoot around the issue because of where our technology is at, where we can... There are many, many leaders who have pathologos ruling them, or anti-logos or anti-philosophy ruling them, that can push a button and end everything. So, of course, you could say, well, we don't want them pushing the button as a counterattack to philosophers. A lot of dictators kill the academics. Famously, people with glasses even. Oh my God, that means you're smart. There is a And of course, that anti-intellect, that anti-mind, that anti your own interest, anti the logos, is just a byproduct from our evolution. But it's time we evolved. Which is just, we've been evolving all this way. We've got language now. We've got philosophy. Socrates was here. He did a tour of duty. Just got to put our arm up to the next rung of the ladder. And if we can do it while it's fun and supporting each other, helping each other, we have the internet now, which is overcoming a lot of boundaries. Maybe we can have fun with it. Maybe it doesn't have to be about it. Let's finish this section today. Have we anything else besides to say, oh, friend CBs? That's the word, isn't it? Friend. We're all, we're friends. We're all the same soul. We're all self-returning to self through logos. Can we relate to each other's ourselves and each other as friends? Oh, friend CBs, or does this not have to be in this way? Have we anything else to say? Okay, that's confusing. So I'm going to open up this book and see if ATB. Actually, this is kind of the mean. This is the rose. Oh my God, this book's falling apart. This wasn't even my book. I swapped it anyway. This is the Rouse translation. That's kind of the mean between the Balboa and the Lobe. But we have the Lobe. Let's bring that up. That's a mountain in grass. Let's bring up this one. Right, and we are in ATB. Let's find that. Then see CBs. Missed out the word friend. See how good Balboa is? If this is not the conclusion from what we've said, that the soul is most like the divine and immortal and intellectual and uniform and indissoluble and ever unchanging, and the body, on the contrary, is most like the human and mortal and multiform and unintellectual and dissolvable and ever changing. Can we say anything, my dear CBs, to show that this is not so? No, we cannot. Right, so that's what we were saying here. Yeah, so the word or shouldn't be there. It should be that. So let's cross this out. Have strike through. We have strike through. Yes. Have we anything else to say, oh friend CBs, that it is not in this way? There is not. Okay, this was a weird translation, but is there anything we can say to disagree with what we just said? No. What next? Since this happens to be in this way, it is not naturally proper. Is it not naturally proper for the body on the one hand? Oh, I keep saying on the one hand. Don't have to say that. Is it not naturally proper for the body to dissolve easily, and for the soul, on the other hand, to be altogether indissoluble or very near to this condition? Qualifier here, which is curious. Don't know why that's there. Near. Interesting. I don't know why, but it's a question. How could this not be the case? Well, maybe it can, it's indissoluble in the way it can dissolve into the hyparxis of the whole soul. Maybe that's what he means. Or our souls, by being in a body, don't feel that way. I don't know. Actually, let's see what he says here. Since this is the case, is it not natural for the body to meet with speedy dissolution, and for the soul, on the contrary, to be entirely indissoluble or nearly so? Same thing. Of course. How could this not be the case? Realize then that when a human body dies, on the one hand, the visible part of self can also lie outstretched in the visible realm, which we call the corpse, which naturally dissolves and decomposes, but does not immediately undergo any of these processes, but still remains for a reasonably long time, even a very long time if someone happens to die with their body in a suitable condition and in a suitable season. Why is he going into that detail? For when the body is bound together and embalmed, here might be our answer, just as the embalmers do in Egypt, it remains almost whole for a remarkable length of time. And even if it should decay, some parts of the body, as all bones and sinews and the like, are nevertheless, one may say, deathless. What? Some parts of the body, like bones and sinews, are deathless. Okay, let's see what. Sorry, folks. This one. But when the body is shrunk and embalmed, as is done in Egypt, it remains almost entire for an incalculable time. And even if the body decay, some parts of it, such as the bones and sinews and all that, are, so to speak, indestructible. Alright, yeah, I guess that's why we have skeletons on Halloween that come up and run around, because the bones last from, well, not they're, so to speak, indestructible because they last for a much longer time. Our bones do. That's how come we have skeletons. Very scary. Yes. On the other hand, will the soul that is formless, which wings her way to the other realm, that which is noble and pure and formless, as if truly to Hades, be winging, then will then our self be scattered, which is surely of this kind and nature, and be destroyed as soon as she leaves the body, as the majority of humans say? Far from it, oh dear Sebies and Simius. But what must happen is much more like this. If on the one hand she is pure upon leaving, dragging along nothing of the body, as far as she has no voluntary association with it in life, but avoided it, and she gathered self together, self in herself, inasmuch as she always practiced this. But this is nothing else than practicing philosophy rightly and really practicing to die. Or is this not what practicing dying should be? Absolutely it is. On the one hand, is it not the case that when the self abides in this way, she makes her way to the formless, to that which is like self, the divine and deathless and mindful? Some more words for our dialectic. Divine and deathless and phronesis. Which upon arriving, self will be a good daemon. That's a big one. Having rid self of wandering, of ignorance, of fear, of wild desires, and all the other human defects. Do we want to remove human defects? Yes. Individually and collectively. That's what we're on. And on the other hand, just as it is said concerning the initiates, there's our mystical initiation, she will truly spend the rest of time with the gods. Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Shall we say it in this way or some other way? In this way, by Zeus. Whereas on the other hand, I do indeed believe that if she is stained and impure upon leaving the body, inasmuch as she has always been associated with it and cared for it and loved it, having been beguiled by the desires and pleasures of the body, so as to believe that nothing else is true, wow, other than the physical, which one can touch and see and drink and eat and use for sexy times, thus being accustomed to hate and fear and avoid this. But that which is dark and formless to the eyes, but is intelligible and tangible to philosophy. Do you believe that a soul in this condition will depart pure, self according to self? No way. Beguiled by the desires and pleasures. To believe, this is a big thing. If you live this kind of life, you will think nothing else is true other than the physical. It's all you know. You feel justified in pursuing your pleasures, we call hedonism. Touch everything, see everything, drink everything, eat everything, use for sexual purposes everything. That's what motivates you. And those are the sorts of people, often we call them tyrants, who hate and fear and avoid that which is dark and formless to the eyes, but tangible and intelligible to philosophy. So we have that word here is, looking it up, noiton. Noiton means probably, knowable. So it's from nous, I would suggest. So we talked about tyrants and dictators, of which we have many right now, and we have a history of in even recent times, which we have to address if we want to be rational and save humanity and bring about a rational, join the human race as a species. We've been talking about that, and here we have Socrates pointing out, hey, this is what causes that. You're beguiled by the pleasures, and not only that, you believe nothing else is true. No wonder they feel certain killing those are only pursuing those. They think it's the realest thing. Even in philosophy, we pursue the realest thing. Again, the vices aren't the opposite of virtues. They're a shadow of virtues. They still pursue the realest thing. All people do, really. They just don't know what it is. In fact, they have the opposite of philosophy. They think that which they can touch and see and drink and have sex with is real. And as a result, they have become accustomed to hate and fear and avoid those that is intelligible and tangible to philosophy, the logos. So here we have this, as earlier I was saying, one of my puzzles is how to share that which is most beneficial, important, beautiful, fun, interesting, cool, considering that a lot of human people, based on where we are in our evolutionary chain, through time, have become accustomed to hate philosophy, hate the logos, hate reasoning, hate understanding, and fear it. There is a fear of their own understanding. Of course you have to train people to fear it if you want them to have faith, because you don't have faith if you understand it. You don't need it. You don't need belief if you have understanding. You don't need to trust someone else if you see it yourself in nous. That's the game. But also, if you were the one ruling, you'd want people to fear themselves, hate themselves, fear their own goals, be a servant, be a slave. It's a remnant of our caveman days. And so what was it? Many dictators went for the intellectuals first because they fear them and they hate them. Every pathologos, every family has a fear and a hate and a kind of way of training the children to stop logosing at a certain point, here and no further. Do not question our family way of being. This is the way it's always been in our family. This is the way you have to be to survive in this culture, in this religion, in this household. My dad did it this way and I'm doing it to you. The family curse. That we can purify ourselves from, because just because we're familiar with it doesn't make it right. In fact, is these things we're most familiar with, fearing, hating, avoiding that which is most good and pure, and all these terms, intelligible, uniform, pure, beautiful, just, rational, logos. We don't want to hate and fear that. That's the cause of our blocks. So that's the dialectic we do on ourselves. Yes, it's easy to talk about others, but we're also talking about ourselves. We want to do this dialectic on this, but also this part. The part of us that is accustomed, just like we are practicing ourselves, practicing philosophy, practicing the virtues. There's also a kind of practice if we're not doing this. Whatever else we're doing, we're training ourselves in the opposite. This is the problem of fantasies, distractions, daydreams. You're becoming more accustomed to that which is anti-philosophy, is against philosophy, that fears philosophy. And you'll think it's true, and you'll pursue it. And he's saying, hey, if you're that kind of person, will you depart this world pure? With your soul pure, self according to self, or will you be beguiled, stained and impure, seeking only the desires and pleasures of the body? CB says, you will be in no way whatsoever pure. Socrates goes on, thus I do believe that when she is seized by the grip of the corporeal, what an expression, seized by the grip of the corporeal, who keeps company and has intercourse with the body. Now, that word intercourse with the body, what does that mean? Let's look that up. I think this is the Old English version. Oh, let's bring up the internet. Paste it here to translate it. Yes. Copy that. Paste it in Google Translate. Sinuisia. Oh, okay. So there's ousia there with SYN at the front. So we know ousia. Oh, okay. So it's kind of ousia, but with the body. Maybe sinuisia means a diminished ousia or a false ousia or a pseudo ousia. Let's see. Okay, we're not getting it there. Let's try the dictionary. Copulation. Meeting, coming together. Intercourse. Okay. Okay. Now, I would love the etymology of this. Let's look at that. Sin. Positive quantity. Plus. Addition. Additive ousia. Interesting. Being with or together for purposes of feasting, conversing, social intercourse, or society. Right, so it's physical ousia. It's additive ousia. It's not real ousia. Oh, welcome to the chat. We are studying Plato's Phaedo. we're just about finished for today. But of course, you can find these on YouTube. They're going to be posted soon. Hopefully, they'll be up by the time you see this. Well, yeah, if you're seeing this on YouTube, of course, it will be posted. What am I saying? We're studying the Phaedo. The Phaedo is Socrates' last day. He's giving his doctrine of what it means to be philosophy. And in doing so, his friends are like, yeah, okay, but can you prove to me that the soul exists after our physical death? Because Socrates says that philosophy is the art and practice of death and dying, and it's purifying yourself in a certain kind of way. This part here, let's read this. When the soul that is formless wings her way to the other realm, that which is noble and pure and formless, as if truly to Hades, in the company of the good and mindful God. So you're going to be in the company with that's important, the company. So you're going to somewhere, if you lived your life rightly, which is philosophy, company with the good and phronesis God. So this phronesis thing we've been seeking, God has it too. God willing, my soul will soon be going there. So say, hey, hopefully I've done philosophy right in the right way, purified myself, so I'll be in the company with the good and the phronesis God. Then our self will be scattered, which is surely this kind of nature, and we'll be just... All right, yeah, so will we reach that, or will it be as the majority of human beings say, that as soon as your soul leaves the body, it'll be scattered? Far from it. He's talking to his buddies, Simius and Cebes. We call him Bill and Ted, or Beavis and Butthead. Of course, they're not dumb, but compared to Socrates, of course. Simius and Cebes are his two buddies who are in his prison cell the day that he's going to be murdered for being a philosopher. Oh dear Simius and Cebes, what happens is more like this. If your soul is pure upon leaving, dragging along nothing of the body, so far as she has no voluntary association with it in life, so you're only doing as much as you have to, but she avoided it. Hey, don't get into physical stuff, pleasures of the physical body, avoid it, and instead gather yourself together, self by self, as much as you have always practiced this. This is nothing other than practicing philosophy rightly. This is Socrates, the big dog, the father of Western thought. The guy who kept the logos alive, is keeping it alive for us, even after the counterattack by the Latins and the Romans and the Nazis. It's the tradition that we're in now from Aristotle and physicalists. Counterattack to truth. It happens within us as it happens within the world. So he is saying this is what philosophy is rightly. It's really practicing to die. Or is this not what practicing dying is? Of course it is. So if self abides in this way, she makes her way to the formless, to that which is like herself, the divine. So he's describing it now. Divine, deathless, phronesis, this thing which we've been after our whole lives, a kind of special virtue, a currency that we trade our other virtues for. You will be a good daemon. Right, good point. So this whole daemon thing, we'll read in the channel, we'll read the apology, which is before this. Socrates is on trial and he says, yeah. So he's on trial for corrupting the youth by making the weaker arguments sound stronger, which obviously is people who fear the logos, fear reasoning. But he's also on trial for having a daemon, having a new kind of spirit that they don't say, oh, if you have your own daemon, a spirit that communicates to you from the divine through the logos, then what use will you have to believe authority figures who want to tell you what to do? He goes, yeah, I got a daemon. He's my inner voice. We all have an inner voice. Jiminy Cricket, right? We just got to learn to listen to it. By the way, you will be a good daemon. So all the ways that we've been talking about, how Socrates is communicating with us. He's using the logos, but he's also giving us puzzles. He's also presenting analogies. He's giving us questions to seek. He's encouraging us to find questions, carry them, make our own hypotheses, carry them, develop our skill trees, rub patterns together. You're not telling someone what to do. You're not bullying them. You're giving them this brilliant video game, this brilliant quest for them to exercise themselves and purify themselves and benefit. That's what Socrates is doing. He is being a good daemon. And how do we know that? Because he's going to be he's going to be with that which is like self. So if he's going to a place that is divine, immortal or deathless, and phronesis, and a good daemon, then he is, actually says here, he will be a good daemon, as he is now. So we're learning about the logos and the dialectic as our way to reach truth and upgrade our virtues to phronesis, but we're also learning what it means to be good, a good daemon, to use the logos in that kind of way. So today I've been talking about puzzles I have. How do I share that which I love without destroying other people's questions, without sharing too much? How do I tell the truth while realizing that people have been trained to hate the truth? So how do I present it in a way that's going to make it appealing and interesting? That's part of what this channel is about. Which is a question of, how do you be a good daemon? How does the daemon communicate with us? How does the daemon communicate to Socrates? How does it communicate to us through our dreams? What is the voice of the self? So, you will be a good daemon yourself, having rid yourself from the wandering of ignorance. Bam. I need a bam sound effect. Fear. Bam. Wild desires. Bam, bam, bam. Okay. Let's get rid of it. Let's make this all yellow. And other human defects. These are the things we want to rid ourselves of. This is the kind of wandering. And on the other hand, just as it is said concerning the initiates, she will truly spend the rest of time with the gods. So this whole initiation into phronesis, that makes you always abiding with the same. So long as you're always in contact with the beings, you will cease from your wandering again. So there's a repetition. So we can take these repeating terms and weave the sections of the text together. So weave this cessation from your wandering. Your soul is drunk if it wanders about, dizzy and confused because it's dragging the body. Don't drag your body around. Go on trips out of your body. Otherwise you'll be drunk. This is your ceasing from wandering. That's phronesis. That also goes back to our initiation, which was to upgrade the currency of your virtues to phronesis. So here he's saying, weave it all together. Weave together cessation from your wandering with what was wandering mentioned earlier. Weave it together with your initiation, which is like way earlier in the text. That's our sewing needle of infinite truths. That's part of solving problems. You weave the sections together using these key terms. You will truly spend the rest of time, imagine that, with the gods. If you are stained and impure, upon leaving the body, inasmuch you've always associated with it, cared for it, loved it, been beguiled by the desires and pleasures of the body, so as to believe nothing else is true. This is important. What you accustom yourself with, what you fantasize about, think about it. You take as your most true. You want to see it and touch it and drink it and eat it and use it for sexual purposes. And you will become accustomed to hating, fearing, and avoiding that which is formless to the eyes, but is intelligible and tangible to philosophy. Right, this is the condition of people in ignorance. This is the condition of injustice and vice. Addiction. What do you chase in addiction? You are beguiled by the desires or pleasures of your body. That's addiction. Why? You consider that high to be the highest truth. You think it's true. Do you think a soul in that condition will depart pure, self according to self? No way whatsoever. What do we call that? Seized by the grip of the corporeal. When that's what you are, you've kept company and had intercourse. By the way, this is what we're looking up. Su usia, which is kind of like an additive usia, or a joining, like a physical joining. Like sexual intercourse, you like join with another physical thing. Whereas pure usia, it's self-referring. Notice, self according to self goes all the way through here. So that's the kind of joining. That's the kind of usia. Not additive, not adding physical things together. That's sunusia, the kind of intercourse with the body by always being in its service. Who's the master if you're in service with your physical pleasures and pains and fears and hates and desires? Are you the master, or is your body that which is more akin to the corporeal? Is that less like the divine? Is that the one who's in charge? That's where you're at right now in the chat. Well, review this video. Keep practicing. Practice philosophy in the right way. Awesome. Getting back control. Yeah, it's a discipline. It's a practice. It's the habit. We have this community. We have the Discord channel. We have these YouTube videos. You can keep going back to them. And through this attention to self, all right, so if you're in the service of your body, through the attention to the body, you have made your soul, right, you've made your soul similar to the body, right, and it's the remembering that we remember we have a soul that is divine, that should be in charge, or rather we should be following the daemon, the voice of the divine, until we become like the daemon ourselves. But it's a practice. It's fun though. It's the best game in town. So if you are in its service, so you're not the one in charge, you will have been made of a similar nature of your body. Don't do that. Don't spend this lifetime, says Socrates, making your soul like the body, like that which is seized by the grip of the corporeal, hating and fearing and avoiding philosophy, beguiled by the pleasures of the body. It's time to evolve back up. Very much so. Thus, it is necessary to believe. Notice, it starts with a belief until you can understand it and know it. That this body is burdensome and heavy and earthly and visible. So again, a whole bunch of adjectives. What's he giving us? Material for our dialectic. If this whole self by self away from the body's practice that we're doing involves the dialectic or is the dialectic, he's giving us material to play with. Burdensome. Look at all the adjectives. Burdensome, heavy, earthly, visible, and through which such a soul is being heavy, is dragged back again to the visible world. We want to be dragged back again to the real world. In the chat, how would you deal with impatience and urgency to rush to make up for lost time? I know. Well, you have to see how is it blocking you from the logos? If you're rushing to this, yeah. In fact, follow. Yeah. The very start, the first thing he said after he's tell my wife to take my wife home. Oh no, he talked about his dreams. He said, hey, after he talked about how Socrates is listening to his dreams and the instruction from his dreams are his master. Interesting. He says, tell Euvenos that if he's of sound mind, if he has phronesis, by the way, follow me as quickly as possible. If you're a philosopher and you've done your life's work in a worthy way, don't kill yourself, obviously, but follow me to this place I'm going out of the body. As quickly as possible. So yeah, spend all day doing this. It's not a problem until you've seen that it's blocking you from your most meaningful goals. Which means do this, see if that habit comes in to block you from doing this, and then take notes on it. Notice the logos, the states of mind that come up. All the same things we're doing in the dialectic you can do to the state of mind, not of the state of mind of phronesis and truth and being, but of the state of mind of the block. The state of mind that comes up to impede. Which means you have to be in the game. Otherwise, how will you know it's a problem? Unless it's literally blocking you from the... If it's a pathologos, it's all those things he said. If it's a problem, then it has to be all those things that follow non-philosophy. Bring it up. It has to be that which hates or fears or avoids philosophy and drags you back to the visible realm. Meaning you have to be doing philosophy to recognize it's a block. Or anything, meaning you can start with everyday meaningful things. I want a meaningful relationship. I want a meaningful job, that kind of thing. It has to be personally significant and meaningful, such that you can determine a state of mind that drags you away from it. That's a problem. Not yet. It has to be a repeating thing. It can't be a one-off, like a flat tire or something. That's not the kind of problem we want. If you notice, there's a repeating state of mind that comes up. Just as we are doing a dialectic on divine, deathless, phronesis, good, mindful, daemon, good daemon, abiding according to the same, uniform, indissoluble, deathless, intelligible. These are all a state of mind. A state of being, and if you have, the state of self is called phronesis. This is the phronesis that we want. To always be, to cease from your wandering, dragging your body around, confused and dizzy as though you were drunk, to remain in contact always, in the same way with that realm that is pure, eternal, and deathless. You will be akin with self. That is the state of self called phronesis that we've been after. So, how do we get that? Well, it's a dialectic. Use all these adjectives. He's given us so much material to do a dialectic on phronesis or being or truth or soul. Pick one. Pick all of them. But if there's a problem, it's the same thing, because our vices are a shadow. All it lacks, as we've been seeing, is you're still desiring something. You're just not desiring phronesis, logos, and being. So that which is not on the logos, that which is not on being, that which is on the human, the mortal, the multiform, the dissolvable, the never the same, always changing. That which is ignorant or fears or wandering or drunk or following wild desires, stained and impure. Do the same thing. So this would be the B side of the dialectic of what you do want. Like, what if the soul doesn't exist? Or what if philosophy doesn't exist? Or what if phronesis doesn't exist? Use all these negative adjectives in your dialectic. But if you're talking about your own personal blocks, same thing. Oh, that block state of mind. Take a pause from the dialectic, open the other note. What are the logos? What's the material? What thoughts come up? What do you say to yourself? What's the state of mind? What's it like? How do you feel? Use in the same way we're using metaphors to do a dialectic on being, understand being. What metaphors would you use to describe your state of mind? What's it like? Is it like being trapped in a car? Is it like being under a waterfall? What's it like? So use the logo, pull out material on the logos, words, and states of mind. Do a dialectic on it. The more you practice that, the more you'll become familiar with it, the more you'll become to understand it, the more you'll realize, oh, there are certain key things that repeat that might be more causal, more akin not to self, not the hyparxis of all of the beings, self, or self-ousia, but the false self-ousia, sun-ousia. There might be an underlying false image of the self, underlying all these. That's a quest. So you could say they're a gift. It's the material you need to go on a quest that you are here for. You're here for a reason, to figure out some false belief that your soul is carrying through your incarnations about being, about the self. Same game, 2 questions. So, it's necessary to believe, O friend, that this body is burdensome and heavy and earthly and visible, and through which surely such a soul, being heavy and dragged back again to the visible world in fear of the unseen formless and of the afterlife. They call it Hades, the next place. Just as we are told, wallowing about tombs and graves, and about which shadowy phantoms of souls have always been seen, images supplied by such souls that have not been set free in a pure way, and have still participated in the visible, on account which they are visible. Don't we tell this? Tombs and graves are scary, and death is scary, and shadowy phantoms and ghosts who haven't fulfilled their role here stick around and haunt you, and we make horror movies over and over about this thing, right? Isn't that what we say? That's the fear. The false mythology that gets us to fear the unseen realm. Like even something that's a little bit about more supernatural or spiritual things, like Harry Potter, all of the Karens, the Christian Karens, it's the devil. Magic in a book, that's the devil's work. Fear, they've been taught to fear that which is unseen. It is very likely, Seabees, that these are not at all the souls of the good, but the souls of the thoughtless, which must necessarily wander thereabouts, justly requiting, for they have been nourished previously in a defective way, and in as much as they wander indeed because of this, until the desire for that which they follow closely, the corporeal, must bind them to some body. But they are then, as it is likely, bound to such characters that correspond to whatever they have usually happened to have attended in their life. What's he talking about? Souls of the thoughtless. Who are the souls of the thoughtless? Who wander. Who have to go through some just requiting of their ignorance, or what has been nourished in a defective way. Hey, you spend your life chasing your addictions, being a slave to the body and the ignorances and what you consider to be true, that's vice. Do you have to go through some just requiting of that you have previously nourished? Based on what? The desire to closely follow the corporeal? Would that bind you to some body? What kind of body? To such characters that correspond to what they have attended in their life. What's he talking about here? Who would be thoughtless, who wander, seeking the corporeal, and haven't nourished themselves in philosophy but in a defective way? Who would have to then become bound to a body in their death? Not only a body, but a character that corresponds to what they have attended in their previous life? What's he talking about? What characters are you talking about, Socrates? Those who have attended to gluttony and arrogance and drunkenness, until finally noticing that they are likely to be bound to the tribes of donkeys and such animals. Bound to the tribes of donkeys because they have attended to their gluttony and arrogance and drunkenness. But I thought that's what it means to be a good Aussie bloke. What you say is thus quite likely. But on the other hand, those who have indeed highly esteemed injustice and tyranny and plunder are bound to the tribes of hawks and wolves and kites, which I think is a kind of bird. I'm going to nail this down. What the hell is a kite? I like to nail it down. I like to not miss any word. I mean, we could have guessed by context, but thankfully we have the internet. We can get every single word. Iktinon. What's iktinon? So we can look it up and get it word for word. Iktinon. Overcoming the illusion, yes. Who are those people who pursue a life of drunkenness and it's a kind of kite is a kind of wolf, in fact. There you go. Kind of wolf. Oh, a mythical bird. What? Oh, this one. It's either a kind of wolf or a kind of bird. Let's go back in the text. So what sort of people, upon leaving their life, if they've lived a life of gluttony and arrogance and drunkenness, become bound to the tribes of donkeys and animals? What's he talking about? People who have esteemed injustice and tyranny and plunder become bound to the tribes of wolves and hawks and either wolves or birds. What is that word? Has to be one of them, can't be both. Kite. One says kind of wolf. Yeah, kite. You keep saying kite. What is kite? Yeah, it says a kind of wolf. But this one says a falcon. A bird of prey. A bird of the subfamily Milvain with long wings, weak legs, feasting mostly on carrion. I don't know any of these words. What the hell's carrion? All right. The kind of bird. There you go. So, or where else shall we say such natures go? He's talking about where natures go, certain natures, the way you live your life according to Socrates, based on what you seek. It's either going to be the virtues of the logos directed towards being through the dialectic, which evolves you and perfects you and initiates you and also purifies you of your problem. Dialectic on both. We talked about that today, someone in the chat. What about if I have a block? Do a dialectic on that, same thing. Or you don't do that, you go down to the pub and you get gluttony and get arrogance. And hey, do you see a lot of drunk people who get arrogant about what they don't know? Like to get big fat tummies full of beer and food? What about those who really value injustice? Thumbs up. Thumbs down for that. Thumbs down. I said, there we go. Injustice and tyranny will come back as wolves or kites. Or hawks. For their neglectfulness into such natures, it is not clearly the case. Is it not clearly the case then that the destinations, he's talking about some sort of destination for the others, will also surely be those characters that are most like each one of the pursuits or practices of selves? What you practice. Clearly, is it not also the case then that the most good daemons The most good daemons. This sounds like the ideal. If Socrates' master was a daemon, if Socrates was described as a good daemon in his life, if he's to be a good daemon to be those that are like good daemons, it really sounds like the ideal we're reaching for. Some sort of mastery of the logos to use it to benefit the way our daemon does. Which is what we're learning. We're learning the logos, we're learning the dialectic, we're learning how to use it in conversation, how to benefit it, how to set puzzles, how to encourage questions, how to even address it to purify ourselves from our problems. We are trying to be like the most good daemons who will also go to the best realm. There's a different realm we can go to. We don't have to come back as these kinds of animals. Are those who have practiced popular and social virtues, which they surely call sound-mindedness and justice, that arise out of habit, without philosophy, without intellect. From the chat, we have to be our own parents. Right. Change your masters. If not, you'll pick your parent. It sounds like, the way that you live, depending on what you practice, what you pursue, even if you call it sound-mindedness and justice, if it's without philosophy and nous, the intellect, that which can apprehend being, then you'll come back into a life. You'll pick your parents. You'll come back as a donkey. You'll come back as a wolf. You'll come back as a hawk. Sounds like. Well, we can get language. We can get answers from ourselves if we listen to the voice of the daemon, it seems, from these texts, from our friends, from communities, but from ourselves, in that we're all remembering. But we can help ourselves remember. That's the whole purpose of this channel, Thumbs Up, and the community. To practice the dialectic, practice answering questions, share our own dialectic, share our questions with each other. It's not a one-person game, philosophy. Socrates even had his friends with him right at the end. So hey, those who call themselves like sound-minded people or just people, they won't be the actual most good daemons unless they have philosophy and nous. In what way then are these most good daemons? Good question, CBs. Good for you. That these are likely in turn to arrive at a social and gentle tribe, perhaps such as bees or wasps or ants. No, boo. Or indeed, then again, into the same tribe of human beings. All right. And so moderate people arise out of selves. Come on. You can do better than this. What are the most good daemons? Human beings of moderate people. Let's choose that over ants or wasps or bees. That's a weird thing. Why did he say that? That's a weird thing to say. But it is indeed not lawful to enter into the genus of the god. This is what we want. We don't want. Okay, maybe that's why he's saying this. Hey, maybe you'll come back as a moderate person. Or maybe bees. We obviously don't want bees. And if we're truly philosophers, we want to complete our life's work here and go to that place where Socrates is headed. Because he said, if you're a true philosopher, thumbs up, follow me as quickly as you can to where I'm headed. The place of human beings who are better than here because they've completed their life's work. And good gods and masters. And apparently the good daemons. So be a good daemon yourself. So maybe that's why he said bees. Oh, I don't want that. Well, what about a moderate human being? I don't want that either. Remember all this again? What about all this work I've been doing, practicing these virtues and doing philosophy all the time, pursuing that my whole life? I don't want to come back and do that again. What about entering the genus of the gods? That sounds like more up my alley. Maybe it's a lesser, greater, ultimate. triad. Maybe. Let's keep reading and see why it's there. It is not lawful to enter the genus of the gods without having practiced philosophy. Oh, wow. You want to do this? You want to escape the cycles of reincarnation? You want to come back as a bee or a wasp? Just be a gentle person. You want to come back? You want to be a hawk or a wolf? Value injustice and tyranny. You want to be a donkey? Pursue drunkenness and gluttony. You want to enter the realm of the gods? Practice philosophy and perfectly pure, and apply this philosophy to yourself, as we've been talking about, purifying and perfecting, to be perfectly pure upon departing, other than the one who loves learning, which I believe was Philomethesis. Yes. Philomethesis, lover of learning. Philosophy, Philosophia, lover of wisdom. And of course the triad, Philophronesis. Thus, on account of these logos, O companions Sibius and Cebes, those who practice philosophy in the right way refrain from all the desires relating to the body. Let's highlight that. That's not what I heard on TV. That's not what I saw on YouTube psychotherapists or philosophers that say living a good life is having all your desires sometimes. Refrain and are steadfast and do not surrender themselves to those, not by some fear of losing their property and of being poor, just as the many and the money lovers fear, nor again fear of dishonor and ill repute, just as the ambitious and lovers of honor. So there we have the philocrematos. Is that what it is? See, lover of cremated tomatoes, which is lover, because we said you're a lover of the body, which is philosomatos, and that becomes one or both of philotimos and philocrematos, lover of honor and lover of riches. Of course, riches are the desiring part, honors are the middle part when directed towards the body. And we said the true virtues are desiring and seeking the logos of being with the virtues and phronesis. So, did Plato ever speak on the idea of parallel infinite realities? I think he's talking about there being another reality right now. I think that's what being is. Separating your soul from the body is to enter the fourth dimension. And if there's work to do while you're out of your body, this philosophy, there might be a fifth dimension. And if even in the realm of being, that's still of the self or a shadow of the self or an experience of the self, that means there must be a sixth dimension. Or infinite versions of yourself. I don't know. I haven't heard of that. There's multi-dimensions. Right, so yeah, he does seem to be talking about reincarnation here, that's right. But this infinite parallel dimension things sounds like a sci-fi sort of a thing. Sounds like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yes, philocrematos. Yes, cremated tomatoes. Philocrematos. That's lover of riches. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting idea to play with. You could do a dialectic on parallel universes. If there were parallel universes, what that mean? The people who like that idea kind of use it as an excuse to not do this. I'm not saying you do, but the people that I've talked to who are interested in this, oh, well, I don't have to do it. Some parallel version of me is probably doing philosophy, so it doesn't matter what I do. They often use it as an excuse to go into nothing matters. Nihilism. Well, yeah, everything matters. He's saying, look, to practice philosophy in the right way, refrain from the desires of the body and do not surrender. Do not surrender yourself to your bodily passions and fears and desires. Your fear of losing property, don't follow that. Or your fear of dishonor and ill repute. So these are the philokremetos and philotimos. If you're a lover of the body, you're going to be one or two of this. Don't worry about people calling you stupid head because you're a philosopher. Or useless as the many. Hey, let's use that quote. We had from the Phaedo. Had this earlier today. Practice yourself by doing in that way that the many call useless. Empty talk. And even in this text, they were joking that, yeah, Socrates, you think that philosophers are the ones practicing death? Everyone will say that because they call you stupid. You're not interested in the things they love, physical things. So yeah, you might as well be dead. And you say that philosophers deserve death the most? Yeah, everyone, even the people who don't do philosophy will agree with you because they don't like you because they... Go back up. They hate and fear and avoid the philosophy. So they think you deserve to die. And he said, yeah, they're right. They don't know why they're right, though. They don't know what I mean by death and why we deserve death. So, don't fear being called stupid head. Don't fear being poor. Do what you have to do to get by, I guess he's saying. Only what is needed. Yeah, no voluntary association with it. Let's keep going. All right, do not surrender to your body, not by fear of losing property and being poor, as the many and the money lovers do, nor of fear of dishonor and ill repute, just as the ambitious and the lovers of honor do, seeing as they refrain from themselves. Seeing that they refrain from selves. Let's get that one down. 82C, didn't really read right, so let's nail it down. (82C), let's bring it up. If there are infinite versions of oneself from the chat, what intrigues me is shifting in order to become a version of myself beforehand felt impossible. Right. Right. So you could mythologize that by having physical dimensions. But what you're talking about is a shift from a state of mind where you think of yourself as limited in a certain kind of way to dropping that by seeing its nature as being its cause and the cause being not true, but having the shadow or the image of truth. Whoever treated you in that kind of a way appeared knowledge, but they lack the logos of being. In fact, they are vice. Lack the logos of being, just have the shadow appearance. That's what we called as injustice or vice. So you kind of drop what's false and you are left more purified and more able to reach your goals. But that's a psychic transformation. It's not a physical one. You don't jump into another universe physically. I don't think. So, but you can use it as a mythology. You can use a physical character jumping into, like Spider-Man going into the multi-dimensions to talk about somebody dropping his false idea of self to become that which is more true. But of course it's a remembering. So it's a wiping away that which is false. Sometimes in my dreams I feel strong in a way that disappears. Exactly. It disappears when you wake up. So it's to do with your image of yourself that you're attached to in your everyday world. So these are the two battling daemons. The everyday world daemon tends to be the negative daemon. That's the loudest voice. The one that keeps your problems alive. The good daemon has a quieter voice. Whereas your dreams can give you informations about both. information. It can give you information about both. So you can drop that which is false in a kind of dream, a reminder dream, a reminder of what you are. But like most dreams, because it's different from how you think of yourself in your problem, as soon as you go back into your body, in that the voice of the false self takes over. The same thing with trips. You might have a trip, or you have a friend who's gone on an acid trip or something, and he goes, "Oh, I know the meaning of life." Give him a week or two and he'll be back to his same patterns. Because our false image of ourselves is so powerful. It's even more powerful than the experience of the truth. In dreams or in drugs or in meditation or anything, which is why we have to learn the dialectic and the logos. Because even if we do have an experience, Socrates was saying, without, bring up the text, even if we get some experience of the divine, but it's without practicing philosophy and being a lover of learning, without philosophy and nous, then you'll still have your problems. You'll still come back. You'll still reincarnate, like you're saying, reincarnate into your problems you had yesterday. Or in a new life. Good question. In what way would this world be a dream? So yeah, what is dreams to your physical world? How can you use that as an analogy to talk about this, your everyday waking world? If it's a reincarnate, like in dreams, you don't remember past dreams. A good question. I say hold on to that question. In what way is this physical world a dream? Or like a dream? Good one. Keep that one. So, right. Don't fear being told you're a stupid head for doing philosophy. Don't fear that the finance bros will say you're not alpha unless you make 100K a month or whatever they say. Don't worry about that. Just keep doing this. Do not surrender to them. Oh, since that which is not okay, look, this last part didn't really make sense. So let's pull this up in the other text. 82a, I think it was. Here we go. Interesting. Right, returning to past dreams. Yeah, that's interesting phenomena. That's pretty interesting. Repetition. Repeating themes, just like we look for repeating themes in text. The fact that you're returning to past places in your dreams might be pointing to a significance of them. Record them into audio as soon as you wake up, if you want, if you're interested in applying the dialectic and logos to your dream. Listening to the daemon through dreams, because that's a way of getting the most accurate logos. Audio recording as soon as you wake up. Put an app on your phone or something. Then later transcribe it. So, in this text here, but only the lover of knowledge. Interesting. What did he say in the actual Greek? Let's go back. And one who has not been a philosopher and who is not wholly pure when he departs is allowed to enter into the communion with gods. No, and no one who has not been a philosopher. Jesus. These negatives, and no one who has not been a philosopher and who is not purely departs. But only a lover of knowledge. And we know from our text, it is lover of learning, philomathesis. Oh no, philosophia. It's both. For this reason, dear Simius and Cebes, those who truly love wisdom refrain from the body's desires and resist them firmly, and do not give themselves up to them, not because they fear poverty or loss of property, as most men in the love of money do, nor is it because they fear the dishonor and disgrace of wickedness, like the lovers of honor and power, that they refrain from them. Yeah, it's weirdly phrased. Oh, I think he's saying they refrain from the lover. Yeah, I don't get this. This is weird. They refrain from them. What's the them? Because they fear dishonor, that they refrain from them. This might be the idea that, yeah, I don't know. Doesn't make sense. Let's find it in the other text. 82C. I'm sure it's just a specific, they refrain from philosophy, maybe, because they fear losing. Okay, let's see. Uh, 82C. For the sake of purity, that my two good comrades, those who seek wisdom steadfastly abstain from the bodily desires and refuse to give themselves over to them, not from having any fear of ruin of their home. Oh, okay. Get what he's saying here. So the people who are lovers of money or honors abstain from the bodily desires and refuse to give themselves over to them, so they can have more money, so they don't lose their house if they love riches, or so they don't get dishonor. People think of them as a glutton or a lecherous person. So he's talking about the kind of vices, the shadows of the virtues. There is a kind of abstaining from your passions, but not because we love learning and philosophy, which is the true virtues. So it's a kind of abstaining from your pleasures that we're interested in, because we love learning, love philosophy. So we are motivated by love. Philosophers are motivated by love. We love learning. We love wisdom. That's philosophy. And we love phronesis, if we get a taste of that. So those are the three loves. The other kinds of loves, lover of the body, lover of riches, lover of honors, would only develop character, control over your passions and desires, so that you can get more money. Or actually it's fear. They're motivated by fear and not love. Fear of losing their money and being poor. Fear of getting dishonor and being of ill repute. It's not proper of them by Zeus. Certainly not for all those. On the other hand, CBs, oh my God, gotta stop reading on the other hand. Those who care anything for the soul of themselves, for they do not live in service of the body, and do not welcome talking or walking according to these ways of selves, as they do not know where they are going. Ah, that's cool. The way you talk, the way you walk is a way of being. It's not only your state of mind, whether you are motivated by love or fear, love of learning or love of wisdom versus fear of poverty or fear of dishonor. The way you talk, the way you walk. What do you talk about over coffee? You're going to make jokes that make you seem, I don't know, cool or blokey or alpha? Or are you going to talk and walk in the opposite direction? Take the other path. They must not be led in that opposite direction. They turn to that. But they don't know where they're going. And they must not be led away from philosophy. They must turn to that, to philosophy, to accomplish that deliverance. Deliverance, there's a new idea. Deliverance and purification of the soul, following wherever philosophy leads. How, Socrates? Let's call it a day there. We've got a lot to think about. So he's really laying out the significance, the stakes, what it's like to not be a philosopher, what it's like to be a philosopher. How philosophy, we're going to have a teaser for next time. We're going to learn how philosophy delivers us and purifies us. He said, hey, every way of life, how you walk, how you talk, don't surrender to your desires, but not because you fear things, because you love learning, you love philosophy. But also you want to enter this genus of the gods and not come back as a person or a bee or a wasp or a donkey or a hawk or a kite, whatever the heck that is, or a wolf. You want to be the good daemons. You want to be in the best realm with the good daemons. The better class of men, better class of gods, better class of conversation, better class of activity, more real. And he said, hey, you know what? All this stuff about that we scare kids with shadowy phantoms of the souls, all this ghost stories about tombs and graves. What do we often tell them? Even nowadays, it's the same thing. We say, oh, they're souls that have work to do in their physical life, and they have to find someone who can see ghosts and get them to fill their life's purpose, like Sixth Sense or like many movies and ghost stories. And he says, yeah, it's kind of like that. I mean, we're not to fear the unseen and fear of spooky ghosts and phantoms, shadowy phantoms. No, we gotta, but in a different kind of a way, we do come back. If you don't do your work here, philosophy, then whatever you do put your phronesis to, whatever you do put your attention and effort and passions and fantasies and life energy into, that will be what you consider to be good. Nothing else is true, but you're being beguiled, and you will come to hate, fear, and avoid true philosophy, but you're going to be wandering like you're drunk, according to your ignorance, fear, and wild desires and all human defects. That's not the initiation we're talking about. We want to be like a good daemon, divine, deathless, and have true phronesis, to be pure. Otherwise, you're going to reincarnate. And in the chat, we've been talking about the same thing happens every morning. You could be in a high state in your dreams, but if you haven't perfected yourself in philosophy from your ignorance and towards the truth, A and B, two kinds of questions, then you'll reincarnate into your everyday life. You'll reincarnate into those same problems until you deal with it. And Socrates is saying, even when you die, the same thing. You'll come back as a bee or a donkey or a wasp, or probably a human being with terrible problems, so you can, I don't know, solve your problems. You have to go through some sort of justice. There's some justice in the requiting, because you've previously nourished yourself in a defective way, chasing your gluttony or arrogance or drunkenness or injustice or tyranny, because that's what it means to be a finance bro or capitalist. Yeah, everyone in power is unjust in some way. They're all tyrants. How many tyrants are loved by 40% of the population? Sure. How many people want to be rich so they can be gluttons and be drunk and high? This is the defective nourishment that will cause a kind of reincarnation into worse kinds of being. We are philosophers. We want to be with the good daemons in the best realm. Enter into the realm of the gods. Refrain from the crappy desires, the ignorant ones, because they're crappy. Not because we fear. We don't abstain for them because we fear some other desires or we fear being told we're dumb. No, screw that. We do it because we love philosophy. We love learning. We love this game. We love the benefit we get from it. And the benefit is beyond this life. It's true benefit. It's the true hero's quest in this life and the next. And you're right, there is no avoiding it. It's just a matter of when we want to play the game. When do we want to wake up? For humanity, how much time do we have? How many minutes is left on that nuclear clock? And for us, how much time do we have? Socrates is saying a rush there. Play the game. And why not? The way you walk, the way you talk. Philosophy delivers us. Philosophy purifies our souls. Follow where philosophy leads. I hope that was compelling. I hope that was interesting. I hope you can relate to some of that. I hope you've got some questions and hypotheses with you from that meeting. Thank you for joining me in chat. I appreciate it. Dig the questions. Yeah. And I will see you next time. Thanks again.